Hey everyone, you're very welcome to the latest Output Sports webinar. It's my pleasure to introduce Coach Ron McKeefery of experience in strength and conditioning, multi-time winner of Coach of the Year both in football and the collegiate sector, and obviously years and years of experience in the weight room floor and having had the privilege to coach, for instance, 80 players that have been in the NFL. So today, Ron's going to talk through the really important concept and topic of motivating the 21st century athlete. That will go on for about 40 minutes, and then we're really pleased that a lot of you have submitted questions in advance of the presentation to speak through after the presentation. So we'll do that for about 20 minutes after Ron's presentation too. So Ron, it's a pleasure to have you here. I will shut up now and pass over to you and look forward to the presentation.
I appreciate it, Martin. Yeah, excited to be here. Excited about my partnership with Output and ready to get into a topic that I think is probably the most important thing when it comes to coaching athletes at any level now, but it's really just dialing in and making sure that they understand why you're there. Not just the X's and O's of strength and conditioning, although that's super important. When it really comes down to it, if you can't get them to do what you're asking them to do because they don't know, like, and trust you. It doesn't matter how great the program is. And so when they reached out to me about doing this presentation, we kind of got onto this topic, motivating the 21st century athlete. I always start off these presentations with a story. What you're looking at here is Northeast High School. This is inner city Kansas City. This is where I grew up. It was not a great part of town, a single parent, 5 kids. My mom worked multiple jobs. And so I would often have to walk home, get my brothers and my sisters, and we would walk home after school. And so the building you're seeing there is the high school. To the right, there was the middle school, and to the right of that was the elementary school. So when I went to look for this picture, you can see that there's a news channel logo here. Even 30, 40 years later, the school is still in the news for, I think they had a hostage situation going on, and that's why this picture was there. So still not a great area. um, and so one day I was to the right of the screen here, and we would normally walk kind of to the right of the screen up to the top and back to the middle, and that's where our house was, because that was the busy streets. And this particular day, there's a drug deal going bad on the corner. And so we decided to walk, back this way down this street, and I'd take a right kind of where this track is here. And when we did that, there was a football practice going on, and we didn't have the money for organized football or anything like that. And I just hadn't experienced it. And so the symphony of the pads popping, the whistles blowing, the coaches yelling, the players motivating, was just captivating to me. And so, being 8 years old and not having any boundaries, I decided to walk down the middle of the field right during the team period. And if any of you are coaches, you know that that's probably the worst thing you can do in the middle of a practice. I mean, players were literally dodging me so they wouldn't trample this little kid. And the coach, had a split second there. He could have yelled, he could have cussed, he could have screamed, kid, get off the field. And instead, he decided to take me by the hand and walk me to the sideline here and let me watch practice. And I always start with this story because he had a split second. He's never thought about that one more time, that split second decision. But he had an impact on my life that let me coach all around the world with some of the biggest brands, develop some of the best athletes, and work with some of the best athletes and teams, have success in a career, travel the world literally, doing this. And it all traces back to the split second decision. So I always start with this story because I think whenever you give up time like this, it's super important. You guys are, the converted, right? The impact and the value of education, but our words, our actions, how we go about doing our business can literally change people's lives. And that's a privilege we all have, that we get to do each day. So when we're talking culture, we're talking character, and really tapping into motivating athletes. There's a great book by some authors, Chip and Dan Heath. Now they've written some, when people ask me for book recommendations, they've written 5 of the 10 books that I recommend, or my top 10. I just think that they do a great job. They provide frameworks for a lot of topics. Made to Stick was about kind of giving sticky presentations. Decisive is all about the decision making process. Power Moments all about elevating everyday moments, and Upstream is about leading up. But this book here, Switch, that's the one that really struck me when it came to culture. And one of the visuals that they give in the book to change culture, to talk about motivating, was a man riding an elephant down a path, and I want you to keep that visual in your mind as we go through this presentation. They say to do 3 things, you have to, or to motivate athletes, you have to do 3 things. You have to direct the rider, you have to motivate the elephant, and you have to direct the path, or shape the path. And so when you're talking direct to the rider, again, this little person on top, this is the rational mind. The truth is if that elephant wants to go left, it's probably going to go left, but that rational mind, you still have to kind of tap into. And so it starts with 2 fundamental things whenever you're developing a relationship with athletes, or you ask them to do things that are uncommon, that are above, or that are uncomfortable, and going places that they've never gone before. And that starts with respect and trust. Those have to be the 2 most fundamental pillars of that relationship. Beyond that, it's important to have, this concept of fixed mindset versus growth mindset. There's so many coaches that I know that have what I call a fixed mindset. If you read, anything of Carol Dweck, or any of their work kind of around growth mindset, but growth or fixed mindset kind of presents in, a coach saying, hey, look, that's an athlete that's just the way they are. We'll recruit over them. Or, you're not going to be able to change that athlete. Why waste your time? The truth is this: is if you have a fixed mindset in this business, you are in the wrong business. I mean, we are literally in, the business of changing players for the better. And so you have to have this growth mindset. There was a book written by Simon Sinek. It's called Start with Why, and I love the book. I think it's a fantastic job. If you've never read it, you should read it. There's a TED Talk by the same title. But in that book, he gives us kind of what they call the golden circle. You got to know the what and the how, or you got to know the why before you can determine the how and the what. And I agree with that 100%. Now, the problem is most people think, okay, I'm just going to go and I'm going to ask Martin, or I'm going to ask Jonah, or whoever, why do you do what you do? And they think that they're going to get this really deep answer back. And the truth is, most people are going to give some sort of surface level response. I play football because I'm good at it, or I play football because my parents told me to, or I should, or it pays for my college, or whatever it might be. You have to be able to get to that and really determine that why really, really quick. And so whenever you take over these teams, there's a lot of times where I'll go in, we'll do a team meeting, and the next day we're starting off, and I got to push these guys past where they've ever been before, you know. And to do that, you have to have this kind of deep level relationship, or they're never going to go that far. So I found 3 questions that I ask. I meet with every single player. I call it the why meeting. It's 2 parts. One part is defining good. We'll talk about that in a minute. The second part is their why meeting and really getting to the core of who they are. And in that, I ask 3 questions. The first question I ask is if they weren't a football player, tennis, golf, soccer, whatever it might be, rugby, what would they do? You know, most of these athletes have never thought about their mortality in the sport. They've never thought past that. When you force them to think past that, you start to get answers like, I want to go back to my community. I want to be a cop because protecting people, or I want to be a pastor, or I want to do this, that, or the other. And you really get to start to identify what people are about. The next one I ask is, what's the most difficult thing you've ever been through? Unfortunately, we all are a part of kind of the circumstances and the environments that we've been around. And some people have gone through some really, really tough stuff. And so when you know what that is, and you know the toughest thing that they've gone through, you can tap into that in the training process. Lastly, I asked who's the most influential person in your life, and I want to know who that is, and the reason why. But I really want permission to be able to call that person and talk to them. And when you call them, a lot of times they think that that's a negative. They think that you're calling for a negative reason. But when you spin it and it's positive, and you remind them that, or you let them know that that person said that they're the most influential person in their life, that athlete says that, we're not very good as humans, um, telling people how much they mean to us. And so when they hear that, naturally they feel good. They typically call that athlete, and now I've got the most influential person in their life kind of signing off on me as a coach. And if you think that doesn't matter, you're crazy. And so if you get nothing else from this presentation, I typically go a lot deeper than this on these three. But if you just ask these three questions of every one of your athletes, you will be a better coach and you will have a stronger relationship, and you'll be able to tap in. If this person wants to be the CEO of a company and they're jacking around and they're being a distraction, if I just go remind them, hey, look, you think that you want to be a CEO of Google, you think the CEO of Google is acting the way that you act right now. Or if the most difficult thing, they're going through a tough workout. Hey, this is tough, but it's not as tough as when you got in that car accident and you dealt with this situation, right? Or grandma would what would she think about the actions that you have right now as the most influential person in your life? So these things all wrap up, and it doesn't have to be this cussing, yelling, screaming match between you and the athletes to get them to do what you need them to do. So player profile, the next thing in that meeting that I do is I define good. So again, we're speaking to the rational mind. We're really kind of tapping into that individual. At my level in the NFL and college, they're all motivated by going to the next level, which is typically pros or being an elite pro. From there, I've done this long enough that I can look at somebody and basically, watch them train maybe a half a day and know if they've really got a good shot at being a pro or not. I've got a trained eye that way. I can be a dream killer and basically say, hey, there's no way that you're going to do it. You don't have the measurables, you don't have the strength, you don't have the speed, or whatever. Or I can do what I do in that meeting and I define good. I'll tell them, like, I've never met a college player that doesn't want to go to the NFL. And so I'll say, okay, you're a defensive end. I think this is defensive end data. These are the KPIs for that position. This is what you got to do. Currently, you're sitting at 2 reps. So, we got some work to do on 225, or maybe you're at 5, 3 on the 40 or something. We define where they're at and we define good, right? From there, we kind of rank them based off, the combine statistics and where they're at. And, we'll circle it. We'll say, all right, you're a free agent on bench. You're needs improvement on squat. Your mid-thigh pull is a free agent. And we'll go through and circle those. And now what I do is flip it to where our development is. If they're coming in as a freshman, I'll say, okay, look, you're sitting at poor on all these categories. You're kind of right where you need to be. We obviously want to, this wants to be your sophomore year, your junior year, your senior year, um, and then going in the NFL. If they're, high here, low here, then we're just simply like, you're behind, and we got to do some extra work. And that kind of taps them into and buys them into wanting to come in and do extra work. And so we just kind of flip this around to show them where they're at on the time horizon and reinforce, like, either we need to put some more gasoline on this fire and get you caught up, or you're sitting pretty good. We just want to continue to maximize your strengths. Again, when you're speaking to the rational mind, you need to have clear sets of goals and objectives. I won't go into all this, but they need to know what your program is all about. You need to have a vocabulary. You need to have a language that you're speaking in the building. You need to have a program that is principle based that you can define for your athletes. And so these are 10 principles that I go through with every single one of our teams and make sure they understand, hey, look, overload and progression, there's a lot of ways we can do that. This is the way that I believe. This is the way we're going to do it. Balanced development. Every time you cross the sideline, you expose your body to injury. We're going to make sure that we train the entire body, not just what you want to train or what you see in the mirror. So we'll have a lot of, we'll go through each of these. Principal reversibility. You got to train every 72 hours or there starts to be a detraining effect. And that's why we're training the number of days. When they start to understand the science behind it and you do a good job of educating, it creates better buy-in. I love this quote: as to methods are maybe a million and then some, but principles are few. The man who grasps principles can successfully select his own methods. The man who tries methods ignoring principles is sure to have trouble. I believe that wholeheartedly. So you need to define what your principles are and be able to articulate that. From there, you need to have a pretty consistent approach. And so I use the R7 approach by Mike Robertson. This is pretty much what one of our workouts look like. We're going to always release and reset. We're going to do some sort of readiness. We're going to do our reactive work. We're going to do our training. We're going to do our conditioning, and we're going to focus. We're going to emphasize our recovery. That there needs to be some consistency and some parameters, and within that, there can be freedom. But athletes need to have and know kind of what's coming. It doesn't mean you're doing the same stuff every day, but there needs to be an approach that they're comfortable with, and it doesn't kind of spook the elephant. If you throw something completely different at them, I'm not saying don't do that every once in a while, but I'm saying that on a consistent basis, they don't need to be coming in there kind of, their central nervous system really excited because they don't know what's about to happen. That's not a great thing for your training. Lastly, here you need to recognize that you need to surround your athletes with a variety of personalities. I use a personality profile called the Gary Smalley personality profile, where I have all of our coaches take this, and they're either a lot they all have strengths and they all have weaknesses. Just like as humans, we all have strengths and weaknesses. And so when they take this personality, instead of the Myers Briggs or the disc profile, and there's all these different IMTJs and all these different things, you're one of these four animals. You're a lion, an otter, a beaver, a retriever. Lions like to pound their chest, like to be up front, like to vision cast, terrible with details. A beaver, very meticulous, has a million different to-do lists, but not necessarily the inspiring one. Retriever is your typical athlete that wants to lead by example. Um, and Nothing's going to change, but again, they don't want the limelight. They don't want to be up in front of people. And then your otter is your playful one. Like they're great. They're going to create energy when there is none, but that you maybe don't want them handling the discipline. So when I was a young coach, I thought I want to have a bunch of lions because I'm a lion. Like I love to pound my chest. I love to be up front. I love the vision cast. I'm terrible with details. Again, some people think that that's the right one. I tell you, that's probably the hardest one to be the leader, because details and all those things matter. I thought I'm a lion. I'm a good coach. I want to have other lions. Well, what do you do when you throw cats in a cage, right? They fight like cats. That's where that expression comes from. So I needed to recognize I needed to have an otter, a beaver, and a retriever. And I needed, that way our athletes always had somebody that they can identify. When you're a young coach, you need to develop all these skills. Just because I'm a lion doesn't mean I can completely abandon details. I need to develop that skill and train that skill. When you're the leader, you get to be what you organically are, and then hire for what you're not. So when you're talking the directing the rider, you want to speak to the rational mind. Like you want to educate them, you want to give them all the information. That works until it doesn't, right? Until motivation really becomes the example. It really becomes the issue. So again, little person, big elephant, that elephant wants to go right, it's going to go right. So when we're talking about change in behavior and motivations, there's really two ways that happens, right? There's analyze, think, change, and there's see, feel, change. Okay, this is analyze, think, change is the way that we want it to go. We want to give them the information. We want to tell them the principles. We want to tell them why they're training hard. We want to show them why they're training as much as they're training. All those types of things. They think about it, and then they change. The truth is that there's a thing called positive illusion bias, and we kind of favor ourselves and compare ourselves to everybody else. So as long as we're kind of staying in the middle, we're never going to kind of push the boundary of being elite, or we're never going to, we're always going to be a little bit better than the worst case example. So analyze, think, change, as much as that can work in some cases, most of the time you're going to kind of live in the middle. And it's not going to be, elite and really driving to, win championships. What oftentimes works is the see feel change, right? They see it, either through a negative or a positive experience. They feel that effects and then they change, right? They don't drink water, they go out and they cramp. Oh, I better drink water so that way they don't cramp, right? You can do this both negatively and positively. Negative works. Whether or not people want to agree with that or not, it works. And that's just using fear and anger. That's the lowest form of leadership, if you're just using fear and anger, because eventually they're going to rise up. I do use some negative reinforcement when I need to, right? The key there when you do that, so we use things like our 888 as an example I gave there. If somebody misses a workout, I don't care the reason. Um, there's, like a missed workout is anything over 10 minutes for us. They're going to do an 888. That's 8 laps around the field. That's going to be 800 yards of up downs, and that's going to be 8 prowler pushes across the field unweighted. And it's done at 6 a.m. the next day. It's not fun. It's not a killer, but it's not fun. Like, you don't want to do it. That works as long as you are completely transparent. If you do this action, you're going to get this response, and you're completely consistent. Even though you're the walk on or you're the star, you're going to be treated the same. If you're the star and you're not going to do that because you score touchdowns and this other kid has to do it because they don't, then you're going to lose your team as well. So having some of those things in place aren't a bad thing, right? Sometimes we were all young. Sometimes it takes see, feel, change to make that happen. The way that I prefer that to happen is to be positive, right? Is to use curiosity and joy and drive that to make them want to see, feel, change. So we do that in 6 ways, and I'll run through these pretty quick because I know we're limited on time. But typically, I would tell the stories behind all these. But the first way that I do that is I create life experiences. I try to find, and I typically use the environment that I'm in and find things that are going to create this unique life experience that maybe a lot of guys haven't experienced. And I want you to think about the first time somebody took you on a roller coaster ride or took you on an airplane or took you to an amusement park or something like that. Like the person that did that, you're kind of naturally indebted to. Like you appreciate that person in a different way. It allows you to kind of open up things. And so in our programming, we program in 3 week blocks, and the fourth week is our kind of our deload week. We still train intensely, but we take a day away, and we drop the volume by a day. And that, typically again, there's a deload effect there for what we're trying to accomplish. But then in that day, we kind of do one of two things. We either create um, a positive, it's either going to be a team building opportunity or it's going to be a butt kicker and you're going to remember it because it was a tough workout. And so when we create life experiences, I look to our environment. So when I was at Tennessee, we had the Tennessee Smoky Mountains around us. I told our leadership group to grab another player, a younger player that was struggling, and we all went and we climbed Mount LeConte, which was the tallest mountain. Half of this group grew up in the inner city or cities that didn't have anything close to the mountains, and that was their first experience climbing a mountain. In Seattle, we went and we climbed the stairs. These are stairs all the way up to the top of the Space Needle, and so we ran that as a team and got up to the top there. In Michigan, there was a polar plunge, and so we would jump into this frozen lake, which I hated, but we did it anyways. But it was just kind of an experience that we did as a team there. That was another year, which was way colder. This was some sand dunes, and this is one of the hardest things I've ever done. Actually, is this climbing the sand dune, running the sand dune. But we did a workout on the beach. We camped out the night before. We did a workout on the beach, and then we finished it with this was climbing this sand dune here off of one of the Great Lakes. Again, I had never seen one of the Great Lakes before. This was in Tennessee, whitewater rafting, and what do you see here? I mean, this is a fifth round draft pick, second round draft pick, NFL quarterback, first round draft pick. All these guys played in the NFL, and you see smiles on their face. And that again, that was the first experience for a lot of people. So creating those memorable moments, those life experience, create some feeling of buy-in there. Second thing I do is I look for and create bonding opportunities. These are things that aren't necessarily planned, but just they come up organically and natural. So after one of our workouts, there was everybody was taking off their tape. We ended up making this big tape ball. We drafted teams. We had this little tape ball, softball type game, and this was ended up being the championship. This is like 4 hours after the workout was over, and we're playing this championship, and we still have most of the team there playing to see who won. This is paintball. It took our guys. I just, again, it wasn't organized. Just said we're going to all go and show up. Anybody that wants to show up, great. The whole team showed up, and this ends up being a legal way for me to shoot them. Is what this ends up being. So a lot of fun. Just again, nothing planned. We did that again there. This is a broom ball. This is we taking brooms, playing in tennis shoes, going on the ice rink, and using a little soccer ball and playing hockey basically. This was we did a workout on a beach. And when we were all done, we all just went swimming and watched the sunrise. And again, just a cool, memorable moment that wasn't planned. Every year, there's a tough workout where we're running the stadiums, or doing some other hard workout. And instead of that, I kind of make a big deal about it. I call them back a bunch of times. I yell at them, and then as I tell them that they got to get going, I have our staff in the background pelt them with dodgeballs, and we play dodgeball. But again, I mean, just fun. Like this is Max Crosby here. He's an elite NFL player right now as a freshman, just smiling and having fun. Kickball, same thing. We went and played putt putt, bowling. These are all things that just they just happen naturally, or you can plan them. But it's just get-togethers and spending time outside of the weight room with your athletes. Next thing here is you create one-on-ones. You look for opportunities to create one-on-one situations with your athletes. And so this was an example of a player that his family wasn't able to make one of the All-Star games after they got done playing. It's like 3 hours away. I didn't necessarily want to drive it, but I drove down to be there to support him, because his family wasn't going to be there. So again, like this is a player that graduated. It's not necessarily going to help me in my job for the next year, but that relationship and me and players seeing that, what do you think he's going to do? He's going to go tell the team that, oh, Coach Max showed up and supported me. He has friends on the team, and that's going to permeate throughout. I don't do it just for that reason, but there is some benefit there. I took another play to a NASCAR deal that he was really into cars. Next one here is special workouts. These are things that you plan. Like this is the 4th of July. We call it Red, White, and Boom. This is Valentine's Day Massacre. Every year we make the weight room look like a freaking puked pink balloons and streamers, and then we have a really really tough workout on this day that is memorable. This was up in Michigan where we were going to do our morning agilities, and it was minus 11 degrees all winter long, and then all of a sudden it got up to like 32 degrees and there's snow on the ground, and so we decided to go outside and do the agilities outside. And just again, just a memorable experience. Did we get the perfect shin angle on our agilities? Did we get a lot out of the actual workout? Probably not, but they remember that workout for the rest of their lives. This was a midnight workout where they had to do a bunch of different team building, team task, and accomplish those and create some frustration by having to do tasks together. This was after a loss, and our guys were just kind of not in a great mood, and so instead of staying in the weight room and just doing what was on the sheet, we took the weight room outside and we did a workout outside. This is another Red, White, and Boom that we did at night. This is another one where we invited some athletes from other sports. This is another time that we did mental challenges instead of physical challenges, but in the morning. So you just find these opportunities to kind of do these special workouts that, again, make it memorable and think about it from an athlete standpoint. Those are the things that they remember. They don't remember waking up and doing 8 gassers or whatever it is, but they do remember doing a midnight workout or a Valentine's Day workout or things like that they're going to remember for the rest of their career. Last one here is it's important to include your family. And so this is my daughter Maya. She came up and at the end of a workout wanted to do a selfie, and I'm like, okay, what's a selfie? And so she jumps up on the good ham and takes this picture, and look at all the guys in the background. Like that's a genuine joy and support for my daughter, for our team, and this created this kind of bond. And they got to see me in a different light as a human, as more than just a coach. That I'm a family man, and create a cool experience for my daughter. This was one of those Fourth of July workouts. That was my daughter. She was um, the DJ, and that was my son Tyler. He was the videographer and would run around and take pictures and stuff. But they got to dress up and have fun with the guys. This is a workout that we did with we called this barbells and babes. This was every year on Mother's Day we would do a workout where the moms came in and the kids got to put their moms through workouts. And so this is KJ Armstrong that's taking his mom through a workout. She's the most influential person in his life, but she's getting her butt kicked and he's loving every minute of it. So these things, whenever you include family of the players of your own family, it humanizes everybody and creates buy-in. Lastly, here you want to shape the past. So again, looking at the deal when we're trying to change a culture, we can speak to the rational mind, right? We can tap into the motivation and really try to tap in, push the right buttons. But sometimes it's just removing obstacles out of the path that are going to be stumbling blocks for people. The easiest way to do that is competition. Peer pressure. Athletes, they may not, always respect you as a coach. They may not always appreciate what you're trying to do because they're young. But if you tap into the emotion of competition, which is what they're there for, or you tap into peer pressure where their teammates are going to hold them in line, you can usually get a lot of things accomplished. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we do kind of two competitions. We have one in the winter where they draft teams and we pull them up based off similar talents. And then they go through, we track their points. They all start at 100 points. Every day there's a plus, zero, or minus. We have a draft. They draft their teams. We make it a big deal. Um, this is always the senior class, and we have them come in. We talk about the competition with the entire team. Every single workout is graded plus, zero, minus, so that 100 points they go up or down every single day. A zero means they did exactly what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to show up. They're supposed to work hard. They're supposed to be a good teammate. A plus means they went above and beyond. They were consistently working above the prescription. They were motivating people other than just themselves. A minus means that they were working below this prescription, or they were being a distraction, or they had a bad attitude. So we really define that so they know exactly what that is. We give them the feedback and tell them exactly why they got the grade that they got, so it's not a surprise to them. Each day, those points are put up on the board. So if they're in green, that means they went up. If they're in red, they went down. If they're in white, they stayed the same. And so everybody's single. So a lot of times when I walk in the weight room, they're checking the board. This player right here, there's a good chance that one of these players already got to him and told him that that's not the way we do things or that they want to win. And I don't even have to have this really, really hard conversation with them. Now, I take that, as I would have already called this. My assistants, they call the positives every day on their way home for their teams or for their position groups. I call all the negatives, and I've already had a conversation with them before they even show up the next day. Each week, we do an honorable mention lifter of the week. Um, we have honorable mention and lifters of the week, and so we're recognizing guys for what they're doing. We recognize guys that are doing good. We talk through our process of how we got to those honorable mentions, those lifters of the week. And we recognize this. This is a meeting that we have at the end of every week, every Friday. We go through this. We do who's in first place, who's in eighth place as a team, who was the lifter of the week, who was the honorable mention lifter of the week. And again, that competition, like it seems elementary, but you start putting points to it. You start adding kind of rewards. It could be as small as a T-shirt, um, or a parking place, or what we do is like the winning team has a seat in between them on the plane when we're flying on the road. Um, Things like that, that we throw in there, it becomes a big deal. From there, we have them compete. So when we do our agilities, we have our 8 stations just like everybody else does. We change those up quite a bit, so it's not the same thing every time. They do their 8 stations by positions, but then when they get into the when that's where a lot of people stop. We get together, we have a little bit of halftime. One of our coaches gives a message, and then they get into their teams. And now I would have been drafted maybe against Martin. We'd be in a 60-yard shuttle, and we're tracking wins, losses. We get as many reps as we can in 6 minutes, and then we transfer to the next station. So we track which team. So we might have the Lunch Pail Boys versus Rock Bottom, me versus Martin. And at the end of that, we're going to tally it up. There's a chance for it to be 2-2 for the stations. Then we always end with a finisher where we put an athlete out in front of their peers, having to compete their butt off, and try to win it for their team. So it makes it fun. We track it like wins, losses. It's bragging rights for that day. It's bragging rights for that training period. And then at the end of it, um, we have bowl games. So the last workout, it all works up to who the top 2 teams are. They're in the national championship. Then we have New Year's Six, Pizza Bowl, and the Toilet Bowl, and there's awards that kind of go with that. So the winner of the Toilet Bowl literally gets a roll of toilet paper as their reward, and it's a lot of fun. We just make it cool. And then we have a award ceremony where we kind of go through everything. The losing team has to feed the winning team. They have to wear chef hats. They have to deliver 4 courses of a meal. And then they're eating, I think, hot dogs and beans or something. I can't remember what we give them. We also have what we call the standard board. You're either satisfied, hungry, or starving. Again, we go through, everybody's graded. We have our strength coach, our registered dietitian, our position coach, and our coordinator all rate them 1 to 3. This is kind of how we define it to the players. This is how we define it to our coaches and those people to grade. Well, then again, 1's below the standard, 3 is above the standard. They have to give a reason why, so we can give them feedback. And then we just track that and rank them. We have magnets, and it starts here with the top, person with the most points, starving, all the way down to satisfied. And so you kind of always know where you are in the program. And in times like now with NIL and things like that, like you have to be completely transparent. All right, lastly here, technology. Technology is something that you can use quite a bit to really tap in and give them feedback that is not subjective, and so that happens in a variety of ways, whether it's, your VBT and incorporating it into some of the competitions, or it's your jumps and tracking that. But we use it throughout our entire program. One thing that's nice, and again, I want to touch on this. This is just something that I'm working on, not necessarily related to the motivation, but this is motivation for the athletes that know that you truly care about them. And so, with output, I've been working with them to create this quarterback screen. We basically track range of motion for shoulder, elbow, wrist, T-spine, and hip. It's a screen that we do every single week. And you guys know as well as I do that, especially that are in football, if we get the right quarterback, then that severely increases our odds of winning. And when we're recruiting those athletes, it's super important to show them that you're going to not only get them better, you're going to create a cool environment, but also that you're going to keep them healthy. And so this quarterback screen, we're able to go through that every week. We're able to put some standards to some of the metrics, and we get a quick snapshot of where they're at. So if we're -4%, we can do some things to kind of balance them throughout the week, make sure that they're back ready to go for game day. And it just becomes this really great piece of technology that we can use to keep one of our most important positions motivated throughout their training. So I can answer more questions about the quarterback dashboard and the range of motion, but again, I couldn't say enough positive things about output, the ability to do VBT, measure jumps, do range of motion, but be able to do that all in one product, especially at the price point. That was a no-brainer for me. So this is my email, website. handles on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all those types of things. But yeah, Martin, if you want to jump back in, any questions from the group, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Ron. Took an awful lot from that, both in terms of leadership and motivation. I think even goes beyond weight room. I think I'll be taking some of that to lead an output as well.
Absolutely.
We in advance of today, we've had 25 people submit questions, so far too much to get through in terms of today, but some amazing topics. So just so everyone's aware, we will go through some questions for the next 20 minutes or so. But anything that we don't get through, myself and Ron are going to take as kind of inspiration and input to our upcoming content together in terms of blogs, socials, etc. as well. So thank you very much for everyone that submitted them. Ron, to start out, there's one that's probably really strongly linked to the talk you've just given and really kind of, I guess, relevant to all coaches on the call. And basically, someone has asked, what is the one thing you'd want coaches to walk away understanding about motivation that they're currently getting wrong? So I guess like a common misconception about motivation you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, not having clearly defined relationship, I think is the biggest thing. And, what I always say is that, your athletes, they have, you got them for 2 hours in the weight room, they have 22 hours to mess up everything you just did. So if you're not a part of those other 22 hours in some type of way, then you're fighting a losing battle every day. And it just becomes this transactional relationship when they come into the relation in there. And if they like what you're doing, they're going to support it. If they don't like what you're doing, they're not going to support it. If you start to become part of those other 22 hours, and I say that by like the example of my assistants calling the people that got positive scores, or me calling the athletes that got the negative scores, or me driving down the street and passing a Taco Bell and calling one of my players that has to lose weight and say, hey, look, I just drove past Taco Bell. I better not have seen your butt in there. You know, little things like that are going to show those athletes that, hey, look, that they really truly care about me, that they want me to succeed. And it goes beyond just that's their job, you know? And so I think what a lot of coaches do is they check in, they do the work, they check out, they focus on their family, they think that that's what they're supposed to do because it is a big part of it, right? Is making sure that you're doing that. But you have to try to blend the two, and that's why I talked about like making sure my daughters and my wife and my son, are involved in what we do, and that we have players over for dinner and things like that, just to really start to kind of blend those two things to where athletes feel like you care about them more than just what they're able to do for you on the field.
That's fantastic, Ron. I really, really appreciate that. Kind of linking the two, William Mutlow asked, is there any way to carry over the use of, for instance, technology and velocity-based training into an athlete's overall sense of motivation?
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, I think the gamification, that's probably the biggest benefit of all the different tech suites that exist out there right now is being able to tap into that gamification, create leaderboards, create internal competition. I think the problem with that is, if you're only relying on leaderboards for that motivation, then it only rewards the genetically gifted, right? So you got to find ways to create that to where they're competing against themselves and then improving against their baseline, or uh, they're competing against people that they're competing for jobs for,
Mhm.
things like that. I think that's the important part there. But I think so many times what the beauty of technology is now is that it's putting numbers and data behind what we would usually say is our coach's eye. And that's going to be, in the past, it has to be like, this is my feeling, or this is what I think you're doing. I don't think you're living up to your standard. I don't think you're pushing hard enough. And so now it's like, look, the data is saying that you're not doing it. It's not just me, and I think that becomes a huge motivation when you're having some of those difficult conversations.
No, that makes a ton of sense, Ron. And the as part of your presentation, when you mentioned the competitions you create, where you create like sub teams within the team to compete against each other, we've seen that across the board with output as well, up in a highly motivating way to make sure it's not just the genetically gifted always getting the praise with leaderboard. So that's fantastic. Um, With that, then there's a couple of say like specific questions to say high school athletes and other domains. So I might just start with actually retaining athletes in the white room. Amber Reyes asked, "What are your best practices for retaining athletes in the high school domain, or recommendations, I guess, for the same?"
Is that in terms of keeping them at your school or just keeping them engaged, you think?
Yeah, I think combo of both. Like I guess showing up to the weight room and engaged in the training.
Yeah, I think one of the one of the best pieces of feedback I've ever gotten from one of our athletes is that they said that they were going to take my internet away because I was coming up with so many different exercises and they didn't know what to expect. And so I think keeping your environment fun and you need to have consistency, like with the R7 approach. Like I said, they need to know kind of what's coming next, so they're not kind of worried about that. But in terms of what you do in those blocks, I think variety is the spice of life. You saw that as one of my principles. Like you got to keep variety into your program. And if every single, the last thing those athletes want is to be, oh man, we're going to do squat again today. Like, oh, like great. Like there's a million different ways you can do the squat. And the squat isn't the only exercise that you can do for a lower body bilateral movement. So like you can mix that up in a variety of ways. And then when you're able to tap in and add technology to that and have them compete against their previous numbers and pull that data up in a split second and present it to them, like that's what athletes want. They want to compete. They want to get better. So tapping into that and engagement, I think, is the daily piece. In terms of keeping them going from other schools and things like that, like we fight against that in college and stuff with NIL and all that. I think it's important that you constantly show your athletes that you're evolving and that you're getting better and that you're incorporating things that are quote unquote cutting edge. And so like, there's a lot of programs. One tactical thing I would give people is a lot of times you get, the end of the fiscal year, you get the new budget, you buy everything you can at that time, and you dump it out to the athletes at that time. I would always keep things behind and I would strategically put them in when they came off breaks. And so I'd either rearrange the weight room or I'd add a new piece of technology or we would add a new way of doing something every single time they came back from a holiday or whatever. And what that did is it just kept them thinking that we're always working to get better, and I think, that's what's going to be said by other recruiters is that they're doing some sort of cutting edge thing that you're not doing. But if you're constantly showing that and you have a good relationship, they're going to be like, nah, I've heard all that before.
Oh, very, very interesting and super useful. Specifically when starting a new role at a university, Travis asks, like, what are the few things you do to make an impact early on as a coach and a leader?
Yeah, having that why meeting, I think, is super important. It takes a lot of time, especially when you're dealing with 150 players. Like to have a 20-minute conversation with every single player, that's a big time investment. But they see that, and they recognize that. I'll be honest with you, like one of the very first things I make sure that workout is super, super hard. Like
Mm,
they're going to realize that it's different.
mm,
You can always scale back, but if that first workout is not very hard, then you get all the birds chirping in the locker room, and they're like, oh, I don't know if this is really going to be that much better or whatever. But if that first workout's a freaking tough, they're talking about that for the next week, or longer. And I think you do it safely, right? You don't want to have any rhabdo or anything like that. And that's where some technology and things can help you kind of have cutoff points. But I want to make sure that workout's hard. And then I think it's super important that you find the key stakeholders. Who's the key guy at each position that you need to get the buy-in from and really put some extra time and effort into them. One of the things I always ask those players is what did they like about the old strength coach and what did they want to change? And if they wanted to, what the things that they wanted to change or the things that they liked, I'd try to find ways to keep that in if it fit what I want to do. The
mhm.
things that they want to change, if I can find quick wins there, like if it's like, oh, we wish we played country music on Tuesdays. That's it. I don't care what we would do, right? Like, that's a quick win that shows you that you're listening to them and you're taking their feedback. And I think doing little things like that, finding quick wins, helps create some of that buy-in from those key stakeholders. And again, like you have to protect against those other 22 hours. You want what you're doing and how people perceive you to be positive.
That's fantastic, Ron. Just kind of jumping off the first part of your answer there on the importance of the why conversation. As you're running through it, I thought it was like fantastic. I could really see the impact it would have on culture going forward. But I was wondering about like, especially for younger athletes that maybe haven't been asked questions that personal or that really make them reflect that much before, like how you like overcome the barriers to make them open up and to build that trust, especially let's say if you're new in the university and they don't yet know you as a person.
Yeah, it's a good question. And to be fair, I've not worked with younger athletes. It's always been college or pro for me. But I do think college, even that 18, 17-year-old that's coming in, like I think you can have that conversation. I think they've lived some life at that point.
Mhm.
Um, I think the key, what I would always tell people, the difference in the NFL, like one of the things in the NFL that I really enjoy is the having to have ingenuity, keep things fresh, kind of always sell yourself because they don't have to listen to you, right? They can come in and be like, I don't want to work out today and see you later. So the question became, how many different ways can I trick you into squatting today? And the kind of the manipulation of that a little bit. I think it's the same thing there. Like I think you got to find what are some of those questions that you can ask that are going to get the answer that you're looking for, and so they may not know what they want to do after football, but I think in that situation, I would probably center it more around what they want to do next,
Mhm.
and so like, what kind of job do you hope to have? What, who, you haven't gone through a lot, or have you like, has there been any, tough things that you've lived through? If not, like, what are some of the tough things that your friends have gone through that you know about, or, things
Mhm.
like that. I think those things would kind of help, just at least spark conversation. But one thing I failed to mention when I answered that is that I model that first. Like I answer those questions. If I wasn't a strength coach, what would I do? What's the
Mhm.
hardest thing I went through? My brother being murdered, like that. I
Mhm.
talk about that. You know, my wife being my most influential person and why that's the case. Like I model that and be super vulnerable, and that kind of sets the stage for them to get to that level too.
That makes a ton of sense. Appreciate that, Ron. Um, but another part of kind of the motivational side you mentioned was kind of setting expectations, parameters, and also explaining the why of like what you're doing in training and its importance. And JP asked a question which I think is like so relevant in this day and age is like, how do you counter and overcome all the amount of misinformation that's out there on social media? Be great to hear your insights on that side of things.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the things I started doing probably the last 6 years, 7 years is every in that meeting that we go over the winning teams and all that. The first part of that meeting each week. So every Friday we have a team meeting. In that meeting, I have our nutritionist speak, our strength coach speak, our trainer speak, our sports scientist speak, and they all are either presenting like a little minor case study or they're setting up the next part of our training so that the athletes understand why they're doing what they're doing, right? So if our nutritionist is introducing a new supplement in, she'll go through that, she'll present
Mhm.
the research, she'll dumb it down so that they understand it, she'll put some of the misinformation that's out there. This is probably what you're seeing on social media and all that, but this is the truth, and walking through the science. And again, I think if you stay on top of it, you present the data, you present your case as if you're defending it in court sometimes. The
Mhm.
athletes are smart enough to say like, okay, that makes sense, and I think it is important. I think it is an important thing that was said there, that you have to stay current. Like you have to keep your ear to the ground and hear what the athletes are hearing, and so you got to meet them where they're at, with social media and things like that, and stay current and address those things. But that team meeting, that's literally me taking 15 minutes out of training for us to meet and for each one of those people to have 5 minutes every week. But those 5 minutes of investment of why we're doing what we're doing,
Mhm.
and documenting that with and supporting it with research, it's helped.
Oh, super interesting. Maybe relating to that, one of the questions, it's open, it's not just related to say misinformation. But McDar has asked, what's the hardest controllable within team environments?
I mean, anytime you deal with people, you're dealing with, I mean, any number of things. And so all the outside factors, I think when you start to throw in family and social media and, class and school and all these different things, like stress is stress,
Mhm.
and that it does your body doesn't recognize it one way or the other. They just understand it's just recognized as stress. So that's why recovery is a super important piece of our puzzle. And again, I think there's a lot of technology out there that helps support that, to try to track that, to try to get the information so you can identify it, to create those conversations. So, um, yeah, I think, yeah, as far as variables, like that's my job. It's essentially why I got my PhD in counseling, because I deal with a lot of personal stuff,
Mhm.
but helping people manage that. And I think that's important. Like you got to, like, if you're going to be a head strength coach, and this is where a lot of the young coaches that are listening, this is probably where you struggle a little bit. This is, if you've read my book or listened to my podcast, like the CEO, strength coach, technician, manager, entrepreneur. Well, most strength coaches stay in the technician stage where they're only worried about the sets, the reps, the progressions, the regressions. That's the easy part. Like, give me the back of a napkin and I can write a workout out for you. That's easy, right? Getting people to buy into it and do it, that's the hardest part. And do it when you're dealing with life, you know? And so, like, what you really need to be doing, as much as you're studying the sets and the reps and all that, is you need to be kind of quizzing yourself. If my athlete walked in today and said that their parent died, how would you handle that? Right? If your athlete broke his leg in a game this week, how would you handle that? You know, and you just go through all these different scenarios of like what could potentially happen. Because if you do this, like you read off my experience, like do this 27 years, like you're gonna see a lot of crazy stuff, and
Yeah, yeah.
I've had to do that on top of coaching through COVID, on top of coaching through 9/11, on top of some of these crazy things that have happened in our world too, so those are the things that aren't in the textbooks that teach you how to be a strength coach.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Rod. I've just got two more questions. One is selfish on the output side of things that I'll start with, which is like over your 30 years of experience in coaching and so many different environments, where do you personally see output fitting best into this kind of high performance coaching environment?
Yeah, I think what's nice about output is, where I think the challenge with output, and I've mentioned this to you and others, is like this is this all-in-one solution, and because it's an all-in-one solution, everybody has maybe a solution for maybe two of the three, or one of the three, or whatever it might be, and that makes it tough sometimes to kind of abandon maybe a relationship that you've created, or an understanding, and having to relearn some different technology. What drew me to output is the portability, and being able to take it outside of the rack and still be able to measure jumps and still be able to measure, velocity, um, and measure and strength, the curve and everything. But the range of motion is really one of the big pieces to me, is being able to quantify that and having these diagnostics. I think whether or not you're measuring like the KPIs, like the combine and things like that, those are tests that you kind of train for and all that. But to have, a mod RSI, or have, you're measuring the 60% on your warm up set every week to identify a detraining or an overtraining marker, or you're doing some of these range of motion screens, and really
Mhm.
being able to not subjectively look at that and say, I think your shoulder's tight this week, like to be able to really define it. To me, that's the answer. And so whenever you're looking at your tech suite, I think there's a couple of parameters, right? How you garner resources, how you get money in your organization is getting harder, right now, especially with NIL and some of the resources going more now towards the players. So it's really going to come in one of two ways. It's going to come either in safety. This is going to help keep our athletes safer and thus reduce liability. Or it's going to come in the form of recruiting, and this is going to give us a competitive advantage in the process. And so I would be looking at this through the lens of like, how does this give us a competitive advantage? One of those main things is being the ability that I'm able to take one resource that I'm putting money towards. I'm already putting some resources to that for maybe VBT or for maybe for force production with the force plates or something like that. But now I can add this range of motion piece to it, like and maybe recruit that quarterback that that we're in on and competing on with somebody else. Those are the types of things that I'm looking for the strategic part of how I can make this a competitive advantage. The other angle that you can come at this, and again, one of the reasons that drew me to output is the price point. When you're talking, some of these solutions, I've never been a fan of just paying for brand. I've never been a fan of just paying for what the staying up with the Joneses. Like I want to really dig in and look at, okay, what does this accomplish? Can we accomplish the same thing? How can I do this as efficiently and economically as I can for our organization? And so output being able to solve three problems for me is big, and and then the challenge becomes going and talking to Adam or Martin or somebody else and saying, okay, look, like this company maybe has a big curved monitor on it. How can we do something like that with this technology?
Mhm.
Solve your problem that way, as opposed to being like, I can't, it doesn't have this. But you don't know because you didn't ask.
No, 100%. And just a tiny plug, if anyone wants a demo from Adam or myself, just feel free to like comment demo in the chat and we'll follow up after this to set something up. Last question, Ronald, I think more so just in terms of that further education side for all the coaches in the call, using your analogy of like going beyond just being the technician and into, someone with a growth mindset and that entrepreneurial approach to coaching. What are like some key approaches and resources you'd recommend for coaches to like expand beyond the, let's say, strength and conditioning textbooks and into the leadership and motivation side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think of things in strategic ways that you can, things that you can put into practice tomorrow. So, like one thing that I did early in my career, I used to be just that technician, right? And then I went through a coaching change, which ultimately almost put my job in jeopardy at the time. And I was like, man, I don't like that, and so that's what tapped me in kind of the entrepreneur piece and going down that rabbit hole. I think two things that I would say. One is you got to get outside of your bubble, and what I do is I try to look to other disciplines for inspiration. So like law and medicine and business and all these other they're strength and conditioning has been around for 100 years, like as a formal profession. So like to think that we got it all figured out is crazy, compared to medicine, right, or law. And so look at some of the pain points that they've had and how they've overcome them, or some of the creative solutions that they have in their space, and see how you can apply it to ours. I've always tried to do that. And because of that, it's always come across that I'm innovative, but I'm really just stealing from other disciplines. Right. The second thing that I would say is a strategy would be start reading outside. Readers or leaders or readers, right? And this is from a guy that I read one book in high school. Like I was not a reader, but I got to a point where I was reading a book a week at one point in my life, just because I didn't feel like I could consume enough information. So what I try to do is I read a book on strength and conditioning one week. The next week I read a book on family. The next week I read a book on leadership, and the next week I read a book on business. And I go on that kind of 4 week, a month. Not when I say read, that could be an audio book while I'm working out. That could be a short ebook. I mean, it doesn't have to be a novel, right? But I think by the things that are important to me, my family, I want to put as much work there as I'm putting towards other things, right? Leadership, like that's my role. If I want to be a leader in the space, then I need to learn and learn ways that I can frame things for my athletes, and from not just leading down, but leading up as well, right? Business, everything is a business at the end of the day, right? How you sell yourself, how you present yourself, how you package your product, that's a business. So taken from that. So I would recommend reading that and finding resources, whether it's podcast or YouTube channels or whatever, in those different spaces, and growing that way.
Brilliant, Ron. I think that's applicable to everyone on the call. So really, really appreciate that final advice. Thank you everyone that joined today. Really, really great to have your questions coming in advance. And I know I found this presentation and discussion super, super useful. So just want to pass my thanks on to Ron again. And this will be uploaded and available following the session. And we're going to be doing more content and education with Ron in the coming months. So looking forward to staying connected with that.